All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode. This one is especially special because I have a literary agent on today who is doing things a little differently than the traditional industry is, and that's a good thing. And we're going to go into why here in a little bit. So, if you're an aspiring author, definitely stay tuned for this whole episode. There's going to be some awesome tidbits, but let's go ahead and bring her in, Jessica Berg. Jessica, how you doing?
I am doing. It's Sunday. I'm not watching football yet, but after this conversation, I think we'll get there.
Yes, nice. Who's your team?
Bengals,
Thanks.
sadly.
Okay. Well, you know what? I'm a Texans fan, so I feel the pain sometimes.
Yeah, yeah, we're done for the season for sure. But what can you do except keep watching?
Yeah, yeah. You gotta,
It's like
you,
publishing.
right? Nailed it.
Yeah.
Well, let's chat a little bit about you. You're a writer yourself, turned literary agent, founder of Rosecliff Literary, and you guys are really doing it a little differently. And I think it's so cool what you're doing because publishing seems to be very secretive and something that you guys have posted about often. It doesn't have to be a secret. It doesn't have to be like a guessing game or a roll of the dice. And you're doing a lot more than just kind of saying those things out loud that aren't being said. You're doing a lot of education. And I love it so much because it does, as a guy who's trying to pitch and find an agent and crack that code, it often feels like you're either behind, misinformed, or not informed at all. And it's such a guessing game. Publishing's already tough. You know, you're almost trying to guess what's going to happen 18 months from now and then pick the correct books that are going to, sell. And you as an agent, I'm sure that's a big factor into what you sign and what you don't. Because you have to bring something on that's going to be attractive to a publisher. So you know what the publishers want. And it's such a guessing game, but I love what Rosecliff is doing. Let's get started with why did you found it and what was the principle of doing it for?
Absolutely. Great questions. So you mentioned I am an author, and after earning an MFA, I spent about 10 years as a developmental editor. And I loved seeing that side of it, but I also got to a point in my career where it became really um unfortunate. I kept feeling like, oh, this is so sad. I've worked with this author for 8, 10, 12 months, and now they've gone on, and I will never hear from them until I see their PM announcement. So I was on a girls' trip with my agent, and that kind of speaks to how close we are, right? We're on a girls' trip. And I was like, hey, I've got this crazy idea. I'm thinking about, next steps in my career, and I think I want to become a literary agent. And we're strolling along in New York, and she stopped and she said, I was going to talk to you about that because I think you have the core tenets, the core personality for it. What does a literary agent do? Beyond the publishing and all the things, I connect people. I connect authors with editors. I connect authors with readers. And so I am absolutely that person at a cocktail party where I see two people who I think should meet and I make that introduction and then I walk away. And that's what we do as an agent, right? So, okay, I made the choice. I said, yes, this is what I want to do. And I started looking around at the industry and realized I don't have 5+ years to give another agency so that they can take a significant portion of my salary so they can let me into the room, right? Like I'm in my 40s, I like to pay my mortgage, I need to eat, I
Mm-hmm.
need money. And so the only reasonable course of action there was to start my own agency. I saw no other way into publishing. And so on reflection, I'm like, well, this should not be, first of all, it should not be this difficult when we know there are countless people who have stories to tell. And so that's really been the guiding principle of everything that Rosecliff does, right? We are here to remind you you don't have to earn your place at the table and you don't have to wait for your invitation to come into the room.
Which I think is incredible because it often feels like that the first roadblock in getting published is getting an agent, and that
Mhm.
seems to be one of the most difficult things to overcome. Is and I'm saying this kind of out loud, not in an insulting way, so please don't take anything that I'm saying in insulting, but it seems like you have to try to read the mind of the agent and what they're looking for in a query letter, in a synopsis, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And every single agent is different. And those expectations aren't necessarily out there. So trying to crack that code just to get started on a query letter is just a steep uphill climb that you're like, I don't even know where to start. I could be doing it wrong from the get go, and you don't know until you get that rejection back. And then we could go into how people get rejections, and we'll go into that later. But like just starting from the query letter, what is your big piece of advice to people to kind of get started on the right foot?
Yeah, so I liken querying to courtship quite often. I've got a piece in Writer's Digest this issue about that. So carpet spraying a bunch of literary agents at once without doing any research or any kind of preparation isn't going to help you. So my advice is um, slow and steady, right? You need to know who you're querying and you need to know why you're querying them. I'm far more likely to be receptive to a cold query if it's absolutely clear to me in that letter that the author knows who I am as a person. And that's not to say like be creepy and stalky, but I know I'm not for everyone. I'm very blunt. I'm high speed. I row hard. I work hard. And some authors don't want that. So why would you then waste your time, right? So the
Mm-hmm.
number one advice I can offer is make sure you know who you're querying.
Mm.
And then the follow on to that is make sure you know who you're querying and know who's on their list. Um, I've got sitting in my manuscript pile to read a gorgeous World War II novel that I want desperately. And unfortunately, it is so close to one of my clients' current projects. And so, even though I love the project, I love the author, they have a great platform, they hit all of the things that I want in a client, I'm probably ultimately going to have to say no because then you're in direct competition with an agency sibling. And I don't want to create that sort of environment.
Okay, you kind of just answered my next question off of that was at an agency, if it's a no from one agent, is it a no to all? Or is it, do you pass it on? Or is it definitely a no? How does that kind of work? Bring me into that mindset right there.
Yeah, it's different for every agency. Um, at Rosecliff, we have 5 agents and we all work in very different spaces.
Okay.
So if I pass on your project and you kick it over to Kelsey Evans, for example, that strategically doesn't make any sense because what I rep and what Kelsey reps are wildly different, right? So at Rosecliff, we're fine if you want to query all of us, but I would say that that doesn't really suit you, it doesn't benefit you in the long run at all. Most agencies are, if it's a no from one, it's a no from all. That's why, again, doing research is so important, understanding where you're sending your work to, because you need to know what their policies are and what's in place.
Okay. And that makes a lot of sense um, simply because of several things you said. One, agents could work in very different genres, and strategically, that makes a lot of sense as an agency to spread yourselves. I don't want to say thin, but that peanut butter spread across all genres, so that you have your job is to sign authors to book deals. That's how you guys get paid. You want to try to touch all the different genres, so you have the widest net casting out there to land deals. That makes sense to me. Um, what I liked that you said was that you really got to know who you're pitching to because it probably means no for the entire agency. So be selective in who you pitch to. And I think based upon conversations I've had with people, that is maybe their biggest mistake is they look at the top name of the agency and say, I'm going for the biggest fish. And that's probably a mistake if you haven't gotten to know the agent and know what they represent because I think a lot of people think that the experience with the top dog is what's going to land them the best deal, and that's not necessarily true.
That's not true at all, right? At the start of our conversation, I mentioned that this is a relationships business, and it entirely is. And so you want to know that the person who's championing your work has the appropriate editorial relationships already in place in the spaces that you're writing in. Otherwise, this is already such a slog. It takes so long to go from conception to seeing your book on the shelf. Why make it take any longer?
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, yeah.
Now you
Hmm.
mentioned a cold query. I want to talk about that a little bit.
Sure.
Because querying is a booger. It's already kind of difficult, but there's a difference in kind of getting those references or getting kind of an endorsement from someone else, and then a flat out cold query. So, what is a cold query for the definition's sake from an agent perspective?
Yeah, so a cold query comes to my query manager inbox with no personal connection to the author whatsoever. Um, as opposed to an author friend saying, "Hey, I've got a pal who's looking for an agent. Can I connect you?" Right? That's a personal referral. Or I'm sitting down one on one with authors at conferences and they're pitching me directly. Right? So those are all warm queries versus that cold call.
How often do referral queries come in, and how big of an impact does it have on your decision making?
So I'm currently closed to cold queries. And so the only way that I'm looking at queries right now are referrals, and they go right to the top of my list. Because if it's coming from an author or even an agent friend at a different agency, whom I trust and with whom I have an established relationship, I'm going to give that a little bit more attention, rightly or wrongly, right? But it's already been vetted. It's already past the first level, whatever that level might be. So yeah, I think that that's an easy way in to get a stronger response.
Why do agents close to cold queries or to close to queries, period?
Um, I have a client list of 15. I currently we're on sub with several projects and in revisions with others, and I want to ensure that can give them my utmost attention. And so that is my reason for closing, right? Because my list is feeling complete and full, and author care is incredibly important to me. As an author myself, I've sat on both sides of this desk at this point, and I know what it can feel like when I send my agent a note and it takes her a week to get back.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I know why it takes her a week to get back because I'm seeing it on the other side, but I want to make sure every single one of my authors feels like they are the only author that I have. And so I think that it's prudent of me to close at this time. And because my conference schedule is so heavy, I know between now and the end of the year, I'm probably going to speak with 300 authors face to face, listen to 300 queries, 300 pitches. So it just feels like the right thing for me to do right now.
So let's talk about pitches, and then I want to talk about rejections. Rosecliff on social media is doing some great stuff to really kind of bring up those questions that I think a lot of authors don't think of. I know it was one of the biggest mistakes I was making when I first started querying, and I was getting no responses at all. I was writing a query letter that I thought was damn good. I was like, oh, this sounds so hot. This is perfect. Silence. Because I was thinking of it in my head, how I was telling the story and the hook for me. It wasn't the hook for you, it was the hook for me. And it wasn't working because I didn't have to sell it to myself. I wrote it, so I wasn't hooking the story and pitching it to the agent. And the minute I started changing that up and I started getting to the point quicker is when I started getting some responses back. Now I got some canned rejections, from people and some stuff that I was like, okay, I don't feel like that was super genuine, but I'm getting response at least. So, what is something that you see that is the first mistake that people are making?
Dear agent,
Really?
that's the first mistake. Like you can't even be bothered to put a person's name in, just dear agent.
Okay. Okay.
And
Yeah.
I think, yeah, that's a number one. I talk a lot about how I like my query letter structured. I love to know I'm delighted to introduce title name, word count, genre, and comps. And I talk about that frequently enough in sessions, at conference, in interviews, that when I receive a query letter that doesn't follow that, I'm like, come on, guy, have you done any research on me at all? Right. And every agent is going to have a different expectation of what they want to see in that opening paragraph. And so if you do nothing else, at least query the agent's name and query letter and see if there's any kind of communication, if they've talked about it at all. So that's number one. And then number two is a lot of throat clearing. And what I mean by that is it's clear to me the author has not done the work to understand how to structure a query letter, which is here's our main character, here's what they want, here's what or who is standing in their way, here's the ticking time element that they must overcome, and then here's what happens, right? Like that's the five elements of a query letter. And when it's a story of survival and second chances and like that's all lovely, but that doesn't tell me what the story is. And all of this is so important because reading query letters, reading manuscripts, looking at developmental editing plans with clients, creating sublists, putting clients' work out on submission, all of this is unpaid labor.
Okay.
No agent is getting any money until they sell your project. So the reality then for me is it's 8 p.m. I've just worked a 12 or 14-hour day. I'm sitting down with a cup of tea and I'm scanning query letters because that's when it can happen for me. And so if you cannot immediately hook me with what this narrative is, if you don't have strong comps, if there's a lot of throat clearing or there's a lot of apologetic, I'm sorry to be in your inbox, blah, 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 you've already lost me because
Mm.
I'm tired at this point, right? I'm up at 4 every morning to go lift. Like I'm exhausted. And so I want to immediately be captivated by it. Now, some authors I think can receive that very poorly, right? And I'm not saying that to in any way suggest that I'm not taking every query letter seriously because I am. But I also want to stress how incredibly important it is for you to lead with the strongest bit of your story, right? Come back to that dating analogy. It is the same. You would not show up in sweats and a hoodie to a first date, right? That's just, I mean, unless you're
Yep.
like doing a sweats and hoodie date, I don't know what that would be like, but
Yeah.
whatever it is, right? um, and so it's the same thing. You have to just be as sparkling and as dazzling as you possibly can be.
Um, I think another good point to make that I don't think you've necessarily mentioned is that how many query letters do you get a year? And how many days in a year are there? And how much of that do you work? And how important is it to, and I relate it back to resumes because I'm a hiring official in my day job. I look at people's resumes all the time. I look at job descriptions. Um, very much the same thing. Like I need to get to the point because I have 2 dozen of these sitting on my desk and I only have the next hour and a half to do it in. Not that I'm not taking each one seriously. I'm on a time crunch to get this done. I need to find the best person quickly. Um, Over to you. How many of those are you doing a year, and why is that? Why does that math add up?
Yeah, the math does not math, first of all. um, I would say, I when I'm open to queries, fiction and non, I average 5 to 700 a month.
Wow.
And that is just cold querying. Again, that's not anything that I'm receiving at conference or from referrals. And so, doing that math, right. I look at a lot of query letters. And so, I mean, I work generally 6 days a week. I'm terrible with work-life boundaries. Like I don't even understand what that means at this point. But again, it comes back to being able to be really sharp in your query letter and know how to structure it. And the thing is, like, so when I started in this industry, publishers marketplace was not really a thing. Manuscript wish list was not a thing. Agents were not out in the world talking about what they wanted, right? You had it was called the writer's market, and it was like 2.5 inches thick. It was lists an agent's name, their address, and send pages. And you just had to send pages, right? So for authors now, agents are more accessible than ever. Why not? It benefits you to your career to do your work ahead of time because it's only going to make it that much easier. And you mentioned something earlier at the start of this that everyone always feels behind. Now, I know you follow Rosecliff on social, and so what I'm about to say will not surprise you at all, but I think part of that is contrived. I think that part of that is something that's created by the industry, right? It's a scarcity mindset to encourage authors to feel like it's a frenetic energy to be like, I have to get this done. But
Mm-hmm.
the reality is, you don't have to get it done because you're never going to catch up with that author who's already on the show. Like you might have dual career tracks, but you're never going to get to that point because you couldn't.
Hmm.
right? Like you're a service member, you enter in as you're a lieutenant. You're never going to be a major until you become a captain, right? Like you have to go through things
Okay.
over step by step.
Yep.
And so that definitely derails from what you're asking was query letters. But I'm going to pause because, as you know, I will just keep talking.
Well, I did the math. So let's do the math here.
Oh,
You
okay, yeah,
5 to 700 query letters a month. Let's do
yeah,
700 on the high end. That's 8,400 query letters a year. You already have 15 clients on the roster in a
yeah.
literary agency that is. You guys are still fairly young, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So if you have 15 and then everybody else in your agency has 15, you guys have nearly 100 authors on the roster that you're trying to get deals for or new or additional deals for, whatever the case may be. So if you
Hmm.
want to become number 16 on Jessica's roster, out of the 8,400, I think everybody just heard what you really have to do and the
Yeah.
time you have to put into it. And I'll go back to the resume thing. Um, if you want the job, you have to make sure your resume is the most attractive thing that individual puts their eyes on that day so that they put it in a different pile and they want to go back later and look at it again, or they put it on top of the pile and say I can't stop looking at this. So yeah, I think I could see why it feels so daunting to do that because you're already up against really hard odds. And like what you said, agents are now a little more vocal about what they want. You can go use the different querying software. You can go to the marketplace. You can go on their social media. They're a little more open about what they're looking for. So if you're paying attention, you kind of know what you're fishing for. But it's still a very daunting thing. So putting your best foot forward is maybe more important now than it ever has been. But I think that's where we can kind of segue into Rosecliff and what you guys are doing and why people should be paying attention. This should be the one literary agency that you are paying attention to on social media. If you guys are, if you're an aspiring author and if you're listening to this episode, you need to go follow them right now. Hit pause and go follow them, then come back, because they're doing education on a level I've never seen. And I've been around publishing for the last 5 or 6 years, interviewing authors, getting to know publicists, and all that stuff. Um, and I've never seen something like this before. Why did you guys kind of take that step forward, or really kind of that step to the side, and say, we're going to do it just a little different? Because you guys are giving free information away that other agencies are not even. You have to find that out yourself. You guys are doing it different.
Because I'm making my job and the jobs of every one of my agents easier by educating the querying author community. I see no reason to hold on to this information. Um, I have been working in writing and publishing for 20 years, and everything that I've learned should not have been as difficult as it has been.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't understand why we have allowed this industry to remain so opaque, right? And so, like, I am of the industry, I am the industry, and so I should be doing all I can to make it better than how I found it. And this is how I can do that. This is me doing that work. Um, so really, it was looking around, and I couldn't envision us being another basic agency. We all have too much to say, and we're all authors. And I think that that's a big distinction as well, is that
Mm-hmm.
all of us have been on both sides. Um, and we all come from different spaces in the publishing and literary communities. And so combined, we really offer, I think, a lot of information that, as you said, lots of folks would make you pay for it. And we don't want to make you pay for it, right? Rosecliff is getting ready to launch small groups where you can work with us in a more intimate way, but that's not until Q1 of next year. And really, I just didn't see. I just couldn't imagine. I don't know. I can't imagine not doing this. I will say all these things to you for free no matter what, because you will ultimately make it easier for me to find the right clients if you know what you're doing. How can I hold you to a standard if I'm not willing to tell you what that standard is?
Mm, mm. That's huge. That almost sounded like something I've heard in the military before. Like if I'm going to hold you to a standard, how do I expect you to adhere to it if I don't tell you what it is? That was huge. So everybody would have been listening to that right there. And also the relationships you're developing with the creators. is huge, because I think a lot of people look at it, go, I'm going to query agents, and then eventually one day I'm going to get a phone call and we're going to discuss, and it might be one phone call and they say, I love it, I want to rep you, and then that's the start of a relationship. Or it's several phone calls and then it's eventually a start of a relationship, but that window is really, really small. You don't necessarily get to know them intimately. Whereas what you guys are going to do at Rosecliff, especially these small groups, it sounds kind of like you're going to develop relationships with authors. And if there's something there, you're going to do all that legwork. So then when you finally have that official conversation, say, yes, we're going to rep this, we're interested in repping you, you have months, maybe years of history with that individual. You have a different launching point. Which I think is a game changer, and it will be a game changer because people will get to know you, you'll get to know them. The investment will be different because right now, again, it feels like you're just waiting for that one phone call, and it might be your only shot of, I know I'm nervous. I got a bunch of queries out there, so I'm waiting for the phone to ring. And if it is that individual calling me at 7 o'clock on a Monday night, am I ready to spill the beans about whatever book I pitched to them right then and there? Is that my only shot on the phone? Like, that stuff's kind of nerve wracking, but developing a relationship is totally different.
Absolutely is. And you've touched on so much there that really guides us at Rosecliff. And we recognize that we can provide information and we can be a resource for you, and you might not ever query us. And that's okay because we're not here to, gobble up every author. There's no way we can't sustain that. We're here to make sure that you are as well versed and as knowledgeable as you can be so that when you do have that conversation with whomever, you know what to say, you know how to talk about it, you know how to feel confident, right? Um, I hear from a lot of authors, oh, I'll do all those things once I get the agent. I'll do all those things once I sell the book. And I'm like, ma'am, you need to be able to talk about your project right now. Because what does your career look like? If you cannot, if you're stumbling over who your main character is in this very casual conversation, what's that going to look like when you're on a panel? Right. And so that it's everything that we do. It's just making sure that it's easier for querying authors to find their person.
So you mentioned life kind of as an agent. You're going to conferences and stuff. I think a lot of people think you guys are just sitting in your office looking over queries and on the phone with publishers trying to make deals. You guys are doing a lot more than that. I've seen a lot of agents get out there to conferences. They go to these pitch fests. What's kind of a typical year like for you, schedule wise?
Ooh, it is busy. I just got back from about 3 weeks at several different conferences with Craft and Publishing Voyage. So we took 30 authors from Southampton, UK to New York on the Queen Mary 2 and worked with them exclusively. Hopped off, had a publishing luncheon, and then did it all again. So in a typical year, I am at a conference probably once a month in person, and I'm doing something virtually once a month. I teach for Writers Digest University, so I've pretty much always got classes running over there. And I'm writing for Writers Digest. I'm doing so much that is definitely not seen. So what does it look like for me on average? I think I'll top out this year at 37 conferences.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mentioned I just got back from 3 weeks and two of which were at sea, and I am not an at sea gal, and that was a lot. So I leave Thursday for Boulder, Colorado for the Rocky Mountain Writers Conference. I return Sunday, and then on Friday I leave for Dallas. I come back, I do an online event, and then I leave for Oregon. I come back, then I'm in Boston, and then I go do a retreat. And so like it's yeah, I set a pace this year that is not sustainable. Next year is going to be a little bit more chill.
um, let's talk about other things that might be attractive to you as an agent that you see in authors. I think branding and platform and and followership and all that have a play. I've also heard that it doesn't. So, from your perspective, because somebody might have 150 followers on Instagram, is that a big deal? Is that a make or break for you when it comes to that? What's branding and platform and all that have to do with kind of your decision making?
A lot. And I'm sorry to say that, but it really does.
Hmm.
Um, During the pandemic, we all learned how to bake bread and we all wrote a book. Just fantastic. Love that for us. Except now we are just flooded, right? We're flooded with carbs and with bloated manuscripts. And so from that, publishing is more competitive than ever. At the same time, during the pandemic, workforces shrunk in all spaces of the publishing industry, right? We have fewer acquisitions editors than ever before. We have more imprints than ever before. So that means that fewer acquisitions editors are doing the work of more people, which means anything I can do to position my clients as a breakout success, especially for a debut, is ultimately going to help. I have a client who is the founder of Operation Delta Dog. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the organization, but they connect um, uh, PTSD service members with dogs from shelters. And
Very
it's an
cool.
amazing organization. Yeah, it's super cool. She's fantastic. So that platform is 500,000. And then she's got something else. And so her total is like 1.5 million, right? Which is great. However, if I only include that as the in the pitch letter, my response rate on her project was less than if I include blurbs from big name author friends that she has. Why am I sharing all this? Because all of it factors in, right? Publishing is risk averse. Anything you can do on the platform, the community building side, to make it easier for a publisher to say yes, you should be doing.
Okay.
Now, the argument then is, well, that takes away from my writing, and that takes away from this, or I hate social media, or. Love that, but no, because if your end state goal is to be a traditionally published author with a traditionally published imprint, this is how you play the game. These are the rules. You cannot out argue the rules. And so this is what it is, right? Um, and beyond that, I think that it reinforces to me, as I'm scouting for talent, it reinforces to me that you know how the game is played, you understand what the rules are, but you're already doing the work. My agent told me a long time ago, writing is 30% of your job, and being a literary citizen is the other 70.
Ooh.
So take that in whatever it needs to be. But ultimately, I took that as okay, I need to build a community. I need to make sure that I've got people who I will stand for, who will stand for me. And it's not just other writers, right? It's potential readers, it's connections for podcasts like this, it's, finding book clubs, it's doing all the other things that when my World War I witchy spy book finally makes it onto like a New York Times list, I've got relationships in play, right? Like that's me speaking as an author. And then that's exactly what I need from my clients. I offer all of my clients social media training because that's how important this is to me.
What are some of the do's and don'ts of social media when it comes to one, your clients, and two, prospective clients?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Don't be a dirtbag, basically. Like, just be a kind human. Because when I'm looking at queries, when I'm open to queries and I'm looking at them, I have Instagram and Facebook open. And you better believe that I am absolutely looking at your page, not to judge you or to evaluate you, but to say, is this a person that I could see myself having a relationship with? Like, what are you like outside of your projects? Because as I keep coming back to, this is such a relationship. And so if I can't imagine us going for sushi, because I can't figure out your vibe or I don't understand your personality based on what you're presenting online, then I'm going to have questions because editors do the same thing, right? Like editors are absolutely vetting because they have to understand, okay, who are we signing? What does this person look like in terms of who they are online? So don't be a dirtbag is one, and then be a good citizen to your fellow writers, right?
Hmm.
And it's very easy. Yeah, with Instagram's repost function that just recently released, I think
Yeah.
it's easier than ever before to repost with a heart. You should read this or whatever it is. It takes 2 seconds and it really means something to that author.
Well, in the day of algorithms and trying to get noticed by freaking anybody, and get any kind of return on what you have, the audience that you've built, no matter how big or small, um, being genuine and authentic is important, and in triggering, the algorithms. And it's something that I've always weighed in on social media is, I want people to know me and know what I'm about, what I stand for, but I also want people to know that I'm not in conflict with anybody. Just because you follow my page and maybe I'm a little more of an advocate for the Second Amendment than you are, it does not mean that I'm going to sit here and go, well, I'm not going to talk to you. If you don't believe in the Second Amendment, I'm not going to talk to you. Like, that's not the case. And I try to have a lot of conversations with my writer friends, and we disagree on things. And I think the beautiful thing about it is we can disagree on things, and I'm still friends with them, and I still follow them, and I text them, and we go back and forth, because that's not the point. The point is we're having the conversations and we're clear about who we are, and we're not in conflict with anybody. And I think some things I see, and I've given some of my independent writer friends this advice. I've learned a lot through doing this podcast from a lot of big names. And that was one of the big things. Like, you want to tell people who you are, but you don't want to be so blunt and in their face about it to where you turn them off, you know, um, because there's a lot of things that people believe in that they don't necessarily show you in the books. And again, we're in the entertainment business, so we're entertaining. It's something that I've seen Jack Carr go through, where people have really beat him up about his political stance in the pages of the book, and people tend to forget that it's fiction.
Mhm.
It's not necessarily 100% what Jack believes, it's what he wrote in the pages of the book for the dialogue and for the story. um, so it's a tightrope walk.
Yeah, it really is. And I think, put another way, it's how vulnerable can you be online while still being authentic,
Yeah.
true to your core values. And so that's one of the reasons why my authors go through social media training, right? It's like an hour and a half first session. I ask very invasive questions so that we can get to like, what are the four things that you feel consistently comfortable talking about? Because when you understand what you feel comfortable talking about, then you kind of sidestep any potential conflict that you might have with a new audience member, right? And you mentioned, not being so blunt and so in your face. I mean, yes, but I also feel like, okay, if I'm getting unfollowers, it's because those weren't my people anyway,
Mm-hmm.
right? They weren't for me. And so that's okay, as long as and I think we do this really well on Rosecliff's page, is that the branding is consistent, the messaging is consistent.
Yeah.
When you see one of our reels, we're going to be a little bit feisty probably in the caption, and we're going to be a little bit silly because we're trying to make sure that you understand what you're doing. And it's the same thing that I do on my personal page, right? As an author, which is kind of how I separate the identities. As an author, I am an incredibly private person, and I very much dislike social media. Like, I just don't want to do it.
I
But
know.
right? No one wants to do it. I have found a way to make it fun, and I have found a way to make it feel authentic to me. My good friend and I just did a 30-day reel challenge where for 30 days we posted a reel. And that was incredibly difficult to
Mm.
say, okay, how do I find the things to talk about? How do I present? How do I be
Yeah.
this vulnerable?
30
And
different things to say. It's
yes,
harder than it sounds.
it really is. But what came out of it was a really freeing experience on social media, that now I don't feel like I've got those same barriers and walls. And so bringing it all the way back to what's attractive to me as an agent when I'm scouting talent, it's exactly that, right? It's the things that both of us are talking about. Just showing up for your people in the way that feels true to you.
Well, and you definitely got to go to the comments on the Rosecliff Instagram page, because there's a lot of fun that's had there. We had a Paul Wall reference back and forth a couple weeks ago, and then I totally missed a Mike Jones one. I'm still embarrassed about it to this day. Like, I can't believe I missed that. I'm such an idiot.
It's all right. It dropped in, and it's old at this point, right? Like, we're definitely showing our age here,
I was telling my wife about that. She's like, "You embarrassed me. You really, really
right?
embarrassed me." I was like, "I know. I totally dropped the ball. I totally ruined it."
Get out of Texas.
But
You gotta get out of Texas.
that's what the that's what social media is for, though, is those things. It's not necessarily all business all the time. And I think if you can have a little bit of fun with it, um, and show your authentic self and be humble, like, just like I missed that reference. I should not have missed that reference. But I'm poking fun at myself, about it today. And I think that's kind of a part about it too, because you got to be yourself. You can't not put up a front on social media. People can see through that when they know that it's fake and not authentic. Um, what do you tell your authors about giving people a glimpse into their private life? Because that can be kind of a fine line, and by no means are authors Hollywood actors, but you get fans, and you kind of have a dividing line between you and a fan base once you start putting out books and getting a social media following. Where's the line that you kind of advise people not to cross when it comes to showing their private life and showing too much behind the curtain?
Every author is different, right? So I have an author who has some notoriety on TikTok for skits that she does, and she records them in her house, and she's great. Some authors don't want anything about their personal lives out there, and so you have to know what your own line is, right? Like as I said, from speaking as an author, um, there is a lot that I don't talk about online. But that's because that's by design, right? That's intentional for me. I need to feel comfortable and safe in what I'm sharing. And so that's one of the early conversations that I have with my authors. Okay, well, what do you feel comfortable talking about, right? Like how do you want your readers to get to know you? And so that's the deciding factor, is how do you want your readers to get to know you? And yes, we are in the entertainment business, and yes, there are a million ways for them to connect with us. Ultimately, it's what is the most authentic. Now, she's not a client, but she is a friend. I think Sarah Penner does a really great job of showing her readers who she is while still maintaining boundaries, right? I think Kate Quinn does a great job with that. Um, it's over and over reinforcing this is who I am. I am an author first. And then secondly, I might also be whatever else you are on the other side of it, right? It's recentering and keeping that focus. Because the internet can be a scary place. We want to believe that it's halcyon and lovely, but it can be really a scary place. And so you need to protect yourself.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about what other things authors can do, and then I want to get into some of the things that Rosecliff is doing, lunch with an agent, and stuff like that. Um, when it comes to showing people your who you are as an author, it's easy to sit there and say I'm an author, and you could have various levels of writing on your laptop, from full manuscripts to two paragraphs. Um, Proving it is another thing, and there's ways you can do that. You can have a blog, you can do a Substack, you can do anthologies and things like that. um, is any of that important to establishing yourself as an author and prospective agents? So if I had a blog where I'm doing short stories on there, um, I'm sure that could hurt or help me depending upon a lot of different things. But in your opinion, is it important for you to see some of my work before you see a full work, or does it not matter?
Yeah, that doesn't matter to me at all.
Okay.
The same with publication credits. Those are fantastic if they are directly related to your project. Like if you've got, 10 years of publishing small fiction, small auto fiction, for example, and now you're moving into a completely different space, that's great. Good for you. I'm so glad that you have done that, but it's not going to change or impact me in any way. Um, I think the thing that really gets me excited is when an author has a newsletter and they have an email list that they're nurturing and developing. And the reason for that is because that is direct contact with their readership. We all saw what happened when Twitter imploded, right? Like Twitter was every author's space. We were all there. We loved it. It was a great community. And then poof, it's gone. And so all of that time that we spent developing that community, if you had not leveraged that into an email list, okay, it's over, right? And so in email lists is that one thing that you can really direct and control yourself. So I love to see that. Um, Beyond that, nothing really matters. I don't care if you have an MFA. Now, like, of course, if you've got like byline in New York Times and you're writing nonfiction and you've got a massive platform, like, okay, let's go. That's
Yeah.
exciting.
Sure.
But by and large, it doesn't matter.
Okay. That's interesting. because I think that the more you got yourself out there and the kind of the resume that you have, the more attractive you might be. But I could also see where it's the opposite. So I think that's interesting, especially people who have a blog, because if you have a lot of people following you, does that matter? I mean, obviously quantity does. It's got to at some point in time.
Yeah, that definitely matters. As long as you've got a way to harness that audience, right? Like it can't just be passive readership and they come and they see it and then go, because from a publishing's perspective, that's not going to translate to sales, right?
Mm,
And that's the part of we actually haven't talked about sales at all in this conversation.
no.
My whole job is to sell your book. And so every time I look at story and every time I look at a potential client, I'm thinking, how do I leverage both of those things to sell your book? And so if you make it easier for me by establishing your provenance and establishing your credibility as an author, that's fantastic. As long as that then can translate to sales.
Yeah, let's talk about sales a little deeper, real quick.
Sure.
Sales are obviously important, and I think nowadays, from what I'm seeing, maybe in just my genre, a little bit more of my genre, the action, adventure, military, espionage kind of thriller genre, really good authors are not getting new deals, and it's because sales matter. And I think, well, for readers, that's probably really hard to see because they don't see sales numbers. They just see what they see on social media, what seems to be popular. And it's probably the truth. But I even have some friends that did not get second deals, and I have a couple of friends that are looking at, potential new endeavors because continuous deals are gone. Are the days of the Tom Clancy's and the Brad Thors that are getting Brad Thor's on his like 25th book. I mean, it's unheard of. No, nobody does that. And Mark Greeny's 16, 17 gray man's deep now. Um, those guys, yeah, they have a followership. They're going to probably continue to get new deals until they're ready to retire because they've brought young readers forward with them through a 25, almost 30-year career for both of those guys. Today, though, with attention spans being as short as they are, you've got to do exactly what you said. Everything has to equate to sales. You can't have passive readership. You have to have engagement because you want to increase the chance of getting a book sale out of that. And I know that's hard for people to do, especially when social media is so dominant. But why do sales matter so much in all these things we've talked about so far when it comes to you? Because you could love a book, but if you don't think you can sell it, you have to pass. That's hard for you, and I know it's even harder for somebody to hear, but why is that so important?
Yeah, because let's imagine you debut and you get a $20,000 advance. That means between trade paperback, hardcover, and digital, you need to sell about 8,500 copies to earn out that advance.
For 20 grand.
Okay. For 20 grand. Okay. Because if you don't earn out that advance, your career is done.
Mm.
Because, okay, and maybe that sounds very dramatic, but I like a touch of drama every now and again. Um, it's done though, because you've now proven to the publishing industry at large that you cannot sell books.
Mm.
And that's it, that's the start and the end of it, right? And so sales, we know that the majority of books that are published sell less than 1,000 copies a year. So you are already up against really challenging numbers. However, if you're doing all the things that we've talked about, building your community, having an established newsletter list, being a good literary citizen, you are more likely to then be able to sell those books, right? Because what is my job? It is to create the space for you to have a successful and long-term career. That's the easiest way in, right? And so you're talking about the military thriller space, incredibly saturated market,
Mm-hmm.
very difficult to break out in right now.
Yes.
I have a client who writes in this space and who has fantastic sales in the indie space and has been around for a while and comes highly recommended. And we've got great blurbs,
Yeah.
great advanced praise, right?
I think I
And
know who you're
it's
talking
it,
about too. Shout out to
yeah,
him.
yeah, yeah. Hi. um, it's impossible, right? It's so difficult
Very talented
and
guy.
I think, yeah, I mean, we love the book so much, right? Like it's a fantastic book. Um, because the market is saturated. And so what does that mean for authors? It can feel really demoralizing to say, "Oh, okay, so now my book doesn't have space or now I don't have space." But the reality is we know everything is cyclical. So just because the military thriller space is saturated at the moment doesn't mean it will be in 5 years.
Hmm.
So with that particular author, I said, "Hey, here are the things that I know my editors are looking for. You're a prolific guy. You can write really quickly. Well, will you write me something that feels like this?" And so he has, and I'm eagerly waiting for it because now we're positioning his career differently. Now we're looking at what the market is wanting and we're saying, okay, we're gonna meet that standard because now we know what the standard is.
Let's go back to that because this guy's a good. I'm not going to drop his name, but this guy's a good friend of mine. I've talked to him plenty of times. I've had him on this podcast, and he's had some great indie sales. Um, does indie matter when it comes to big publishing? Can you go indie and go self publishing and then still strike a traditional deal?
Listen, that's what every author should be doing.
Really?
You should, oh my gosh. Yeah. So to, oh, this is my favorite topic right now. Let me back up by saying that our newest agent, Kelsey Evans, is heading up our indie scouting at Rosecliff, which is because I recognize that there are tons of indie authors out there who love the freedom and the autonomy that comes with being an indie author and still harbor trad ideas, trad dreams, right? So, yes, indie can absolutely make or break a trad career in that if you have sales numbers of 5,000 or more,
5,000.
you have done that without marketing from a large traditional publisher. Can take those numbers and say, okay, this is what they can do on their own. Now imagine what they could do with just a little bit of resource from you, right? And so come back to that 20,000 number that we just talked about and the number um, of units you have to sell. You've already done the majority of that.
Yeah,
And
you've
so
done
that
over
just,
half of that 8,500 books we just talked about.
you absolutely have. And so it absolutely delights me when I find an indie author who has done that or an author who's done that with a small press. Um, because that shows me that they understand how to play the game. And then I can take all of that and I can go directly to my editors and say, look what they've done. They've proven themselves already. Now let's open the door for this other thing. Or they've proven themselves already. Let's do an audio deal or let's look at translation rights. Um, it's gone are the days where if you were indie, you were indie. If you're trad, you're trad. You should be doing both at the same time.
So it's definitely a possibility because I think
Mhm.
that there is a stigma out there that if I decide to self-publish, I'm done. I'm there for the rest of my career. The chances of going traditional are dead. That's not true.
And that was true 10, 15 years ago for sure. And that is not true now at all. And in addition to the author that I'm talking about, I'm thinking through my roster. I have two other authors who are active in the indie space and they're still traditionally published authors. And one of them is a New York Times bestseller, right? Like, so this is, we are now at the point with publishing that you can choose your own adventure and you
But it
can do
is
all
about
the things.
sales. Sales do
It's
matter.
sales. It's a business. I want to be as like MFA literary as possible and be like, it's the work for the work's sake. And that's fun until you want to pay your bills from having a writing career. And then at that point, yeah, it's a job just like any other job.
Mm. Interesting, interesting, interesting. So you guys can see that we've done the math a little bit. It all matters. Sales numbers matter. But let's talk about Rosecliff. You guys are doing some really cool stuff there. Getting interaction with your followers on social media, unlike any other agency I've said. I've heard of, like I said earlier. Starting with lunch with an agent. That's something that's pretty unique. You guys do it, I think it's once a month. Let's talk about some of these little programs and toolkits and stuff that you guys are offering. Um, why are you doing it differently, and what has been the reception?
Mhm. Yeah, so Lunch with an Agent is our flagship complimentary education We offer it once a month. It's usually the third Wednesday of the month at 12:30 Eastern. It's myself and a few of the agents from Rosecliff. We'll spend about 20 minutes talking craft, and then we take questions in real time from the chat. And we do that because you should not have to pay to access our knowledge, right? This is basic knowledge that we're talking about. Um, it's how do you structure a scene? It's what is a synopsis? It's how do you integrate backstory, right? It's basic things that you could go out and Google for, but why not make it easier? Let me tell you how to do it. And it's a lot of fun. We average about 500 or so registrants for each of those events, which is really great to see
Yeah.
because it means that we're tapping our community. Yeah.
Sure.
Um, we like that number. I'd love to see it in four digits next year, and I think that we will probably get there. Looking at month over month growth. So that's our first thing. Beyond that, we're definitely accessible on online, like slide into Rosecliff's DMs. Like, and if it's not something that we feel comfortable talking about in DMs, then guess what? Let's talk about it on lunch with an agent. Because again, it's reducing barrier to entry and it's making publishing an equitable space. To that end, we offer several paid resources available through our link in bio. Um, how to do everything from creating an author platform to really specific craft. And then starting Q1, we'll have a small group, which is 6 to 8 authors who will meet with myself and Tommy Dean for 90 minutes at a time for 6 weeks. And that's the most unparalleled access that we can offer you.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. And then
I
in
went in on that
Q2,
for sure. I'm got my eyes peeled for that because that sounds amazing.
yeah, we're really excited for that. In Q2, we're going to launch a beta reader program because we recognize how difficult it is to find reliable beta readers um, who you feel comfortable and that who are trustworthy and who have been vetted. And so we're delighted to have Alexa Drake heading up that program. She's our author ambassador. And then beyond that, we will be launching a Rosecliff After Dark because we recognize that not everyone, this is brand new. I've not talked about it at all. So you're hearing it first here.
Ooh. All right.
Um, we recognize that not everyone can do a 12:30 to 1:30 event on a Wednesday. And so Rosecliff After Dark will be a 7 to 8 p.m., similar to lunch with an agent. But we'll have some things that are a little bit different. Not ready to disclose all of it just yet, but we're really looking forward to that.
I love that because I've tried to get in on the lunch with an agent thing, and I always pick the day. And then I wind up getting busy at work and I can't tear away to come home and I'm like, dang it! I hear how popular it is and I'm like, it's such a great idea and I just the timing for me doesn't work. So the after dark thing sounds really cool. I'm gonna have to jump in on that when you guys launch that. But your toolkits that you can get, people don't notice, and you can go into their DMs. You guys have a channel too on Instagram. Um, and they're giving out free resources in that too. And on one of the toolkits that you guys released, I was able to take a little bit of that knowledge. I changed a little something in my query letter, and I actually went back and forth with an agent on email several times. They eventually passed. That's okay. But it was the first. It was like really the first intimate time that I had gone back and forth with an agent on a project to see if it was a fit, and that was like that made my day because even though they said no, that wasn't the point for me. It was I was getting stagnant, and then I got a little something that re-energized me. So thanks to you guys, I had that conversation. So the information's there. You guys got to go get it. If you're listening, you need to go follow Rosecliff on Instagram because they're changing the game for sure. um, Jessica, before I let you go, is there anything else that you wanted to touch on and kind of share about what you guys are doing or advice for the industry?
Yeah, so I mean, those are our big highlights that we're really excited for. Ultimately, we want to make this as easy as possible for every author. And so reducing barrier to entry, making it equitable is really what we can do. If there are things that you want to see from us that we are not doing, things that you want to see us improve, DMs are open. Please come let us know. Beyond that, I'd love to just give a shout out to everyone who's following us. We're a baby agency who's making our way by saying the things out loud that no one else wants to, and we really value our community. I mean, you are why we're doing what we do.
Where can people go to find more about you and more about Rosecliff other than Instagram?
That's the best place. We do have So you can find me at Jessica Berg on Instagram. I just launched a newsletter, which is really fun and it's very chaotic and unhinged. So I'd love for you to join me there. It's twice a week, and I do talk craft and I do talk agency stuff. Beyond that, Rosecliff Lit on all social media platforms, to include Blue Sky, Threads, etc. Rosecliff has a newsletter that goes out once a week on Tuesdays, and that kind of centers everything that we talk about during the month on our socials, on Lunch with an Agent, on the resources that we release that month. So it really helps you get like the comprehensive view of all the things. So those are all the places.
Awesome. Well, Jessica, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you. I'm sure we could talk for hours, but I know you're a busy lady. Um, Rosecliff has taken off. You guys are going to be doing some big deals. I know one of your authors, and I know he's a very talented guy. So I wish you guys the best. We'll sign off here. I'll grab the recording. But again, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks so much for having me. This was a great conversation.